What is life? Why am I here? How is it all connected? And how am I going to navigate this beautiful but crazy journey? I'm Sylvia and welcome to the Soul Sunshine podcast. Today I'm talking to Forrest Wilson. Forrest is assembling the luminaries who are raising the bar for planet Earth. Why? Because humanity needs this now and because we can do better. Forrest is traveling the world facilitating, training and building out the infrastructure needed to support the next iteration of humanity. Forrest is the founder of Our Emerging Future. He's a true visionary, a mentor, a guide, and I'm so very excited to have him here with me today. Welcome to the Soul Sunshine podcast, Forrest. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you so much. It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
No worries. And by having you here, I should say I'm sitting in Sydney, Australia at the moment, and you are actually sitting in Portugal. Is that correct? You're in Portugal at the moment?
Yeah, that's right. I'm in Cascais in Portugal, which is just outside of Lisbon.
Amazing. So, Forrest, before we're heading into our conversation today, I would also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. So today we are talking about collective consciousness. We are talking about Forrest's story and what life events brought him to this deep and meaningful work. We are exploring consciousness as a whole, what it means, what it entails, and how a shift can make a big impact for the world we currently live in. We are talking about old paradigm versus new paradigm and what a more positive collective consciousness could mean for human beings and humanity. We are also exploring the work that Forrest does with Our Emerging Future and how you can personally continue your journey of consciousness to a more enlightened state. So it's a huge topic. I know there is so much in there. I've talked to you before. I have heard you talk on various other podcasts and platforms. So even though I have prepared something for today, I'm very excited to see where the journey goes today because I know that talking to you, I don't know where we're going to end up.
And I don't either.
We'll see what wants to emerge. So Forrest, we got connected through a common friend of ours who has been on my podcast before, Divya. And I think it's just beautiful how when you're working in that space, how people that you know and people that you relate to are connecting you forward to other people that are in the similar space. So being connected with you and, the wider team has been a true pleasure to see the work that you guys are doing and the work that you guys are also, doing in Europe and overseas, because me sitting in Australia, I'm mainly kind of in the Australian scene at the moment, so to speak. And it's been, really awesome to be connected to you. And this journey is really only just beginning. So I'm excited to see what else wants to come out of that.
Yeah, likewise. And we'll be in Australia this fall in September and October.
I know.
Yeah.
We'll have to talk about that later when we tell everyone where people can find you and how they can get involved in all the work that you do. So first, to start off today's podcast, tell me a little bit about your background. What's your story and where did this passion for this work come from? Was that something that was always innately there for you, or was that something that emerged, later on in life?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's so many things I could say in response to this question, but I really like to, in terms of an evolutionary journey and in terms of waking up and really getting passionate about consciousness, I like to point to both the passion and the suffering that we experience in life. And for me personally, I mean, I really can't remember a time when I wasn't a passionate person. I feel like that's always been here, just passion for learning, passion for how the world works, passion for culture and having an impact in the world. I feel like that's always been here. And at the same time, the suffering's always been here as well. And I had a real catalyzing moment in my early 20s because my father passed away from cancer just 4 days after I turned 24 years old. And that was after he had cancer for 5 years. So I had these big existential moments young in my life. I mean, at 19 years old, he got diagnosed with cancer, and I started to really wrestle with some big questions like, wait a minute, what's the point of life? why are we here? I really got in contact with mortality and really started asking myself some really deep questions. I mean, I was a philosopher of sorts as a young person, and sitting in and meditating in and living in these really deep questions about the meaning of everything and what I wanted to do with this life. It's like, from one perspective, we don't have that much time here. So,
Mm.
how do I want to live it? And of course, when my father passed away and I eulogized my father at his funeral, something became way more real about that. It went from being a concept that I was exploring and meditating in to something that really sunk into the body and into my tissues of like, wait a minute, we meaning Forrest, we meaning human beings, have got to get going here. Like, I quit my job and I had been working in Singapore and then in Dubai for this global project finance company. And when I found out my father was dying, I went to this company and I gave them my 30 days notice and I backdated the 30 days notice 30 days. So I said, here's my 30 days notice from a month ago. I'm out of here.
No time to waste, right?
Yeah, it was this new kind of consciousness of like the time is right now, and that has taken over in a lot of ways of here we are, the time's now, and yeah, and just completing my share. There's been, evolution for me is driven by both passion and suffering. So I would say there's a very long history of both of those that I could speak to in a lot of ways. But after my father died, I spent my 20s really going, okay, what am I truly passionate about? I worked in a bunch of different startups. I found myself wandering into rooms with people who wanted to build the future. And my imagination was, hey, the future is going to be built in startups, right? We're going to build new technologies and we're going to traverse the unseen worlds and pioneer new frontiers, creating new technologies and new products and services and infrastructure and technologies, things like that. And then what I found is working with just the most incredible human beings in the world is that we were all, in some ways, from one perspective, in some ways, and in my experience, we were tripping over ourselves because of our traumas and because of our unseen aspects of ourselves playing out in our life experience and needing human technologies for interpersonal relating and emerging things collectively. It's like right when you get right to the point of what's possible for human beings, things start to shift. The way we do things shifts. The way that we download the future into this moment is different. And so my passion and my suffering took me into trauma work and shadow work and healing and spending years doing just deep dives
Mm.
into the depths to explore these unseen worlds and get some stuff sorted out so that I could actually maintain a higher state of consciousness, right?
First of all, I'm so sorry to hear about the passing of your father as well at such a young age and such a profound impact on you. But then, how was that journey? How do you think that changed you deep down from, being like an 18-year-old kind of not a worry in the world, just living life to suddenly something so big and impactful happening to you to then looking ahead at your life and going like, well, what now? What am I gonna actually do now? How am I going to change this? How do I want to show up in the world? And doing all that deep work. How was the journey for you? Because we all know that it sounds nice when you think back and when you go like, I've been going through this deep work and I've uncovered all those things. But we all know that there is also a lot of trauma and suffering that comes with that. It's like, yeah, we look back at it from a positive point of view, but like it's not always positive while you're going through it. So what were some of the things that came up for you during that time that led you on to that next stage of your life?
Yeah. I mean, anything you could say about how it was would be true. I mean, you could say, was it challenging? Yes. Was it beautiful? Yes. Was it painful? Was it difficult? Was it, full of awe and wonder? Like, and all of these things are true. I mean, it's been the full spectrum of the human experience. And I guess maybe one thing that helps tie into what I'm up to now in terms of the work I do with our emerging future and what I invite people into at the leading edge is one of the things that was really present for me is how collectively, right, as a species, as a humanity, as a culture, we have not evolved, we have not caught up to this point of our evolution. So we have the social fabrics and the infrastructure and the institutions and the cultures in place to support people having access to education as a young person, going to college, entering an employment market. I would argue that our infrastructure and social fabrics aren't so great for people who are transitioning into elderhood these days. But there's really not globally, collectively, there's not a lot of social fabrics and infrastructure and cultural support systems built out for people who are playing in these more leading edge terrains of consciousness right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I really started to give my life over to life in a way, like when I really said, hey, I'm going to be here to be of service and let life do what it needs to do with me to be of service to the larger whole here. It was like, wait, where do I go to get coaching and mentorship and nourishment and support and be challenged? And like, if you really want to live into our human potential and become like, I use the metaphor of being like an Olympic athlete in consciousness or an Olympic athlete in life.
Mm.
Like, where do you go to get the training and the coaching and the support and the counseling and the body work and all the things that we need in our infrastructure to be able to play at this peak experience? It's like being in a peak experience all day, every day, right? So how do you sustain that? How do you actually be able to walk through the world from this place? And so in a lot of ways, I found it confusing or lonely or challenging in that way too, which was not only is this a difficult path to walk, but we don't have the support infrastructure that we need in place for people to really be able to live into this.
Tell us about our emerging future and the work that you do there. And is this what you are building with our emerging future? You know, a space where people from all places of life can come and find that support and find that level of, you know, understanding and consciousness on their journey?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have been traveling the world for 10 years now, full time, and I have been meeting people and sitting with people and going to workshops and gatherings, and I've been facilitating and organizing events and community. So if anyone goes to ouremergingfuture.com, that's our website, and we have a global WhatsApp community you can join with hundreds of people around the world. And there are more and more people every single day who are going, hey, we have outgrown whatever humanity is doing right now. We've outgrown, like, there are systems and structures and institutions all over the world that are breaking down because they don't work anymore and they're not meeting the moment and what we need to be able to evolve into the next iteration of humanity. So what's needed? And my work has been being a part of the collective of people who's articulating this vision of what's possible. So we could talk about that. Where are we going here? I've been a part of creating incubators and facilitating and gathering the people who are actually building that future now, doing the work of embodying the future that we want to see in this moment. And then going, okay, what do these people need? And there's that answer in manifest reality. People need other people need funding, people need support getting the word out about what they're up to, et cetera, et cetera. And then at an even deeper level, there's what's going on in the unmanifest world and in consciousness itself. And how do we actually facilitate the process of people walking through the world from what we call the ground of well-being, which is a place to relate with reality from inside ourselves. And so how do people access our deep resources? What's it like to live and walk through the world from our soul, right? And how do we relate with our experience individually and collectively coming from this different ground? And what does the world start to look like when we walk through the world from this place? Because when you really start to live in the moment and you really open up to pure possibility and not knowing, right? The statement, I don't know, is also like the statement of just pure possibility.
Mm.
There's a moment for a lot of us, if you're walking the mystical path, where you really let go and you just live in the eternity of this moment right now.
It's interesting when you're talking about the statement, I don't know, and how that's just another way of, you know, infinite possibility, because I've actually noticed myself in the last couple of months being a little bit like, I just don't know, you know, there's lots of moving pieces and moving parts in my life, and sometimes I actually don't have the answer, you know, and you're kind of trying to find the answer with your intellect because we're so used to needing to have an answer for everything. But a lot of the times I've just found myself going like, I just actually don't know, you know. And so I love the spin that you're putting on that, saying, well, that's just infinite possibility. And, you know, maybe we don't need to know everything. Maybe we can just be happy and be content in that space of the unknown.
Yeah, I mean, if you're walking this path, if this is the evolutionary journey that you're on, it's an incredibly, well, let me ask you, how's it been for you?
How has it been for me? Probably a little bit stressful at times because, like I said, I do like trying to solve my, I don't want to call them issues, but you know, things that, yeah, I feel like need an answer. So it is like, it's uncomfortable. I think it's that uncomfortable feeling of the unknown, you know, and the, yeah, that conditioning around feeling like you need to have an answer for something, because why would you not know? So it's that uncomfortableness, I think, that I'm then sometimes sitting in. But then I also switch into the trusting of the fact that the right things will happen, the right people will come into my life, all those sorts of things where you go like, well, that big belief in the overarching field of consciousness and energy, and that the right things will happen for you, and that you don't need to necessarily know every step of the way, you know, that you can just kind of keep doing the things that you enjoy and that you love, and yeah, be okay with the fact that things will happen when they want to happen and not necessarily when you want them to happen.
Yeah, I love what you're naming here because this is, in my experience and in this experience of the folks who I support, you know, in our ecosystem and, you know, my coaching clients and cohorts we run and events and everything. This is what happens. It's like when we start to open up and go, hey, there's something here to being more open and just being more in the moment and being more in possibility and just seeing what can emerge in the moment. All of our conditioning comes up. You mentioned our conditioning, and it's like there's so many stories and frameworks and orientations that we take on as young people from our parents and pastors and teachers and mentors. You know, everybody tells us who to be and how to be and what to do, and we take all this on. And so when we start to really open up and come from not knowing, that conditioning comes up. It's like, well, I want to just be in the moment and enjoy, but I feel like I should have a plan, you know, or like it's really wise to have a 5-year business outcome in mind, right? And it's like I'm just regurgitating something someone told me that I should think.
Yeah, totally.
And so there's this deconditioning process and this process we do of releasing and letting go and parts work, you know, getting different voices inside ourselves on the same page. And more and more and more, we're just letting go of all of our conditioning, all the things that we took on over the course of our life and going, what is my natural organic relationship with reality?
Mm-hmm. And do you think when we're looking at consciousness, is that the shift from an old consciousness to a new consciousness, being in that so-called, you know, rat race and feeling like you need to do things and you need to have all the answers, you need to be somebody and have things and whatever, you know, comes with the kind of Western society that we're living in, versus the just actually following your soul journey and doing the things that light you up and that bring you joy, and that, you know, the way that you can contribute in the world without necessarily chasing all those things that we were, yeah, almost taught to chase, you know?
Yeah, exactly. It's like I'm working a lot right now on what we're calling the well-being economy. This is a big passion and an area of focus for me.
I love that.
And the reason for this is that, you know, my passion has been bringing the consciousness and awakening and healing work like into the world, into the marketplace, into relationship in our families. Like I like to go into the already existing contexts and networks and support consciousness coming online more fully. In air quotes, right? In the real world, right?
How has that experience been? Sorry, I should let you finish your thought, but that, like, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's for me, I feel like it's really needed right now because, you know, the traditional model, I suppose, is you know, you have your life, you have your job, and you have your family, and you have your life, and then you leave that to go on a retreat somewhere in the mountains or, you know, on some fancy, you go to Bali or Costa Rica or something, and you go live in paradise for a week and you have this peak experience. Maybe you do psychedelics, maybe you meditate a lot, whatever. And then you go home afterwards and figure out how to integrate it. So I have my regular day-to-day life, and then I went and had this big peak experience where I felt really amazing and like anything's possible and I'm totally in bliss. And now I got to figure out how do I marry these realities or how do I go back to my old life, and deal with my life, right? Even though I just had this amazing experience. And I want to feel like I did on the retreat all the time, but I got to deal with practicalities and relationships and money and my purpose and taxes and all these kind of things. And so for me, I was like, hey, how can we have integration in the moment? And how do we bring all this work that we do on the meditation cushion and in retreat spaces and everything just into the way that we walk through the world? And that's been incredibly enlivening for me because it takes the meditation practice off the pillow and into the world. And we talk about going from the mountaintop into the marketplace. It's like bringing the insights and the awareness and the love that we access when we get into these states of consciousness into, again, air quotes, the real world, or more like, let's say, consensus reality.
And how would people do that? Like, how would, somebody that is sitting in that space, you just explained, like having just their normal life, so to speak, going on, and then, once a year they go somewhere and they have this bliss experience. How would somebody start to just integrate that into an everyday life, because that could seem potentially quite overwhelming, looking at, well, my life is already so busy, how am I supposed to have that on a daily basis? Or not even just on a daily basis, like on a constant basis, how can you still live and breathe that in an everyday life? What would be some of your recommendations for people there to do or to start doing in that aspect? Because it's easy to go and meditate somewhere in the mountains for a month and just be in that state, but how do you bring that back? And I'm a Vedic meditator, so I meditate twice a day. That's kind of the bare minimum of what I do on a daily basis to just really be with myself and de-stress from everything else. But yeah, I'm just interested to hear what sort of things that you're teaching people and how you are helping people integrate that in their daily life.
Yeah, that's beautiful. You said Vedic meditation practice. Can you say more about what this Vedic meditation practice is? Like what kind of meditation it is?
So Vedic meditation is a transcendental meditation. So it's a mantra-based meditation. So twice a day for 20 minutes is the optimal time that you sit in your mantra and you meditate on that. So it's not guided, it's that transcendental meditation of, you being able to meditate so that the stresses that you accumulate are continuously being chipped away. And so it never gets to the point of total overwhelm because you're constantly working on yourself and on your consciousness, and you've got that transcendence. One of the meditation teachers that I know, he's unfortunately not with us anymore, but he explained it really beautifully, saying, you're sitting in a cinema and you're sitting in the first row and you can't almost keep up with everything that's going on in your life, and you're just really overwhelmed. And Vedic meditation enables you to sit back a few rows in the cinema and, seeing the bigger picture and just being able to breathe and take it all in. So yeah, I've been doing that for over a year now, since February last year. And it's one of the things that I do, but it's been beautiful, for me to have that daily practice. And so, yeah, that's why I'm wondering, what else do you teach people, to have that daily integration of things?
Yeah, and one of the things that I really track with people's meditation practice and in my own life, of course, is our capacity increasing?
Exactly.
From where I sit, ideally, if I can handle, let's just make up, like if I could handle 10 units of stress per day, if I need to sit down and meditate in the morning, and so that I can handle 10 units of stress a day, and then I need to sit down at night and meditate so I can process those 10 units. And I just do that every single day. There's not a growth in capacity to be with more of our experience. Let me put it this way. What we want to do is support people so that maybe number one is an outcome is I could go from handling 10 units of stress in a day to handling 1,000. Maybe that's one thing. So now I have the capacity to contribute more and deal with more challenging things and be with more of my experience. That could be one thing. Or two is, if it took me 20 minutes to work through those 10 units before, can I do that in 20 seconds now? So am I becoming more efficient and more effective at metabolizing the stress that I'm dealing with?
Hmm. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I guess that's what meditation does, right? It lets you deal with the stresses better that you're incurring. Like, that's one of the outcomes for meditation as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And the opportunity here is that we embody the state that we get to in the meditation. Can we actually walk through the world from this place?
Yeah, yeah.
Right. And like you and I can do this in the podcast right now in real time. And for anybody who's listening, you might just notice, like if I take a breath here and I sink a little bit deeper into the experience that I'm having, right? If I just take a breath and I shift into a little bit of a different state of consciousness here, you might feel this in my transmission. You might be able to tell, oh, Forrest is speaking from a little bit of a different place in this moment than he was a moment ago. And just through the transmission and from where I'm speaking from, everybody who's involved with this podcast, you, me, and anybody listening might start to have a different experience in this moment. And so what we start to realize is there's these different states of consciousness that we have access to. And if we can access these more resourced states in meditation, the question is, how long, can I open my eyes and still maintain this meditative state with my eyes open? Okay, can I stand up? Can I walk over to get a cup of coffee or interact with my romantic partner or my roommate? Okay, when does it fall apart? Is it when I get on the phone? Is it when I go to do my business? Is it when I interact with the person I love or my children? When do I come out of this? And that gives us the opportunity to look at that and go, okay, what is it that's happening inside of me in the moment that I meet my child or that I meet my cell phone, right? What is it that happens that I pull myself out of this state to be in relationship with my experience? And the more and more we start to notice this and do this kind of work, the more we can bring deeper and deeper meditative states in relationship with our life all the time. And then every moment is meditation, or in every moment we're embodying these meditative states and they get increasingly fleshed out. And in developmental language, it goes from being a state to being a stage, which means it's not something I just access when I'm having a meditation. It becomes the ground that I orient from and walk through the world from in my daily life.
That's really interesting, and I want to go into the consciousness in a second to remind people of the stages of consciousness and explain that a little bit. But what I found really interesting then, what you were talking about, is the transmission into a deeper stage of consciousness, and how you can consciously do that. That just kind of for me was like, you can consciously do that. Can you sit here and consciously go like, I'm here, for example, I shouldn't say deeper, I should say higher. And I'm going to go into the next level of consciousness, because that's where I want to be right now. That just blew my mind. So talk to me about that. Because
Yeah.
I'm definitely not there. Like I can tell where I am and I can probably tell when I'm dropping, I'm like, ooh, now I'm like not in a good place. But you just reverse that. And I'm like, how can we learn that? Is that just practice, practice, practice and self-work, or how do we do that?
Yeah.
Because that is amazing.
Yeah. So the big thing we start to do is notice, where am I coming from in relationship to my experience? Like, where am I speaking from? Can be a really good question to live in and just something to be noticing, right? And when you get really good at this, you can do this in the moment in relationship. And you can be in the middle of a sentence. Like sometimes I'll be talking more like this, and then all of a sudden I get a little bit and I'll go, oh my goodness, I'm getting a little bit riled up over here. Let me just take a breath, right? Or
Yeah.
like, I'm getting frustrated right now. Hold on, let me just take a breath. And like, it's pretty obvious that something really matters to me about this. So let me just take a breath and sink into what I really care about here. I'm just giving examples of what happens when we become more in the moment about it. So what I can invite you to do and anybody listening to do, what you can do is actually foreground where I'm speaking from and background the words that I'm saying. So I could talk to you anything right now. I could talk to you about getting ingredients together to make chicken, or like, the plans that we have for later, but if you're foregrounding where I'm speaking to you from. Now, the trick is for you, you can go, hey, where's Forrest speaking from? And then can I find this same place inside myself? Like I can feel, I can attune to and listen for and sense into and receive where Forrest is speaking from. And I have that same depth. I have that same place that I can speak from inside myself. Let me just see if I can bring some awareness to this place in me. And then with my breath and with my awareness, I can just nurture this place. And I swear I can almost feel, I can feel listeners on this show going like this. Oh, right. Like a
Mm.
big relief, right? Just like slowing down and going like, okay, let's calm down. Let's be a little bit more still. Let's relax. And then I can breathe and bring my awareness and nurture this place inside myself. And the more that I do this, the more that and you mentioned, higher consciousness. I experience this as a sinking, like where I'm speaking from right now. And I can go higher and I can go lower. Lower, I think, has a negative connotation in spiritual development. So I don't mean that I'm having a regression. I'm not having a crash, right? I'm not going down into an earlier developmental level, but I am sinking down into what we call the ground, right? That's down, the ground of well-being. And it's this place in the deepest depths of our soul. And it seems that in the physical body that it's speaking from a deeper and deeper depth in the physical body. And in our being, it's speaking from a deeper ground in our being. And this is to me where I find we're the most grounded, resourced, coherent, regulated. And even without saying anything, just by breathing and relating with our experience from this place, we're bringing more of all the good things, coherent, regulated, grounded, resourced energy in relationship with our experience. We emanate it into the universe. We emanate it in
Mm.
relationship with other people. And we're all like these Wi-Fi routers that are giving off certain kind of frequencies and vibes and permeating a state into the world.
Mm.
And so the more of us who embody this energy, the more we're going to create a collective shared resonance field of grounded, regulated, coherent energy. So I'll just pause here.
Yeah, no, that was amazing. And I could just feel as well when you were going there, I could see it in your body language, first of all. But then it's just this deep sense of calm that comes across. Because I was sitting up like this before, and then it felt like, oh, I can sit back in my chair as well and just relax. It's this almost like, when you go and have a massage and you're like all tense and suddenly you feel your whole body going like, oh,
Yeah.
like relaxing. That's exactly the feeling that I just got from you and, mirroring to me as well. So that's beautiful. Yeah, that's definitely something we should all practice more. That kind of like constantly like being wired, just letting go and sinking deeper into our being and into the real version of ourselves, right? There's a lot of talk about consciousness in there as well, and I'm just wary that some people might not be as familiar with the terms of consciousness and the levels of consciousness. And even for the people that are, it would be great for you to give us just a bit of an overview, of what you mean when you're talking about consciousness and the different levels and the different stages of consciousness. And then we can continue the conversation after that, because then we're going to look at, what does it mean if we raise the consciousness collectively as well. So if we can have a bit of an idea around that first, that would be awesome.
Yeah, so in terms of evolution of consciousness, I mean, there are a bunch of different models for these. Like you have Robert Keegan's model and Suzanne Cook-Reuter's model, Terry O'Fallon's model, Ken Wilber's model. There's a bunch of different models for how consciousness evolves. I would not call myself an expert on any of these. I think there are people who are way better qualified to speak about these kind of things. And, my passion is supporting people living a more vibrant life and also experiencing more peace, like more peace and more fulfillment, right? More vitality, more aliveness in our life. And that requires in the consciousness journey, right? We have our awakening journey, which is that at some point, like consciousness, you could just replace the word consciousness with awareness, right? And so when we're doing meditation practices, for example, we're cultivating our awareness and we're coming, like you said, not being at the front row of the movie, but stepping back and going, okay, let me sink deeper into the aspect of me that doesn't ever change while I'm being in relationship with everything that changes. And that's really when we look at the qualities of consciousness, when we look at the qualities of awareness, right? Consciousness is still, it's timeless, it's boundless, it never changes, it's all pervasive. And so we're sinking through a meditation practice or by doing consciousness work, we're sinking deeper and deeper into the aspects of us that's timeless and doesn't end, doesn't begin, and never
Mm.
changes. And becoming increasingly aware, right? We're becoming aware we are this awareness. We're becoming conscious, we're consciousness. We're becoming aware that we're aware.
Yeah.
And so then the more we do this, we can go, okay, this silent, still, all pervasive, timeless consciousness is permeating through everything that changes, all of space and time. And the more that we see that, the more that we're in relationship with our awakeness, right? And this is well, I'll just pause here. How's this to here?
Yeah, it's really good and it just rings really true, you know. I'm just thinking about the fact that there is a lot of unawareness still, you know, in the world around those topics. And talking to you about it again, just a reminder of how important it is for people to do that self work and to, yeah, do the work really, because, you so often hear people say, oh, what am I going to change, or how am I going to make a difference? And I think that as a collective, there's still a real, people still don't understand how much of a difference they're actually making and how much of a difference they actually can make, which I guess brings me to that question around the collective consciousness, and where we are as a collective at the moment. And when you were talking about this new world before as well, where we want to take it and where we want to go and what that would look like on a more global scale, because it's beautiful that, pockets of that are popping up everywhere, and you're doing this with our emerging future, and there's, groups around the world and people that are really embracing that and that are really living that. And you always hear about, I hope I'm not saying the wrong percentage now, I think it's about 10%. I think they say if 10% of humanity is, raising their consciousness, that's when there's going to be a consciousness shift.
Yeah.
Overall, it takes about 10%, I think, for it to really make an impact on a global scale. So, yeah, I'm just interested to hear your thoughts on that. Where are we at the moment and what could the world look like that we're living in?
Yeah, and just to contextualize this for people who are listening. So if you look back at human history, when we talk about a consciousness shift collectively, let's look back at human history and go, okay, for hundreds of thousands of years, human beings were hunter-gatherers. This is how we walked through the world. We were hunter-gatherers. And about 10,000 years ago, we had the Industrial Revolution. And everything about the way that human beings related with our experience, or almost everything, maybe not everything, but almost everything, changed. There was a technological innovation that happened. And all of a sudden, we went from wandering all over the place, being hunter-gatherers, to sitting still, right? And starting to grow food and raise livestock and live in one place and create nuclear families and just all these different things, all these different concepts, all these different ways of relating with our experience came online. And then you've got the next one that people point to is the Industrial Revolution. Again, a technological innovation, and all of a sudden, the public school system emerges. The modern day industrial factory comes online. Like there are things that show up that really weren't here before. The way that we make decisions collectively, our governance structures changed. And then just a few decades ago, we had the invention of the internet. This was another shift. All of a sudden, you can work from anywhere in the world. We've got apps and cell phones, and everything about the human experience shifts. So you're having these inflection points right? A moment where everything is different moving forward. And for a lot of us, for me, for our emerging future, for a lot of people who are playing life on the leading edge right now, our felt sense is and our story is that we're right smack in the middle of one of these inflection points right now.
Mm. Yeah.
And so there's this really interesting thing where it's like you can go like I'm looking around at a world that is like almost old or outdated in some way,
Yeah.
right? Like I look around
And
and
you
I'm
can
almost
see it, right? You can see it so clearly.
totally,
Yeah.
totally. Yeah, if you're yeah,
If you are in this space. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. You're like you're walking around and you're going like is this real? Which I mean we could ask on a lot of levels, but you could say like, hey, like there's a sense of having outgrown what we're doing here. Or if you're like me, there's like a longing with like, wait a minute. There's increasingly for me and more people, it's like there's this reality that has been coming in. You can feel coming from the unmanifest realms or the unseen worlds. You can feel this new world that like this moment is pregnant with. You can feel it here. Like I can taste it. It's so here I can lick it, even though I can't see it or touch it with my concrete eyes or my physical hands. I feel like I can touch it with my awareness, with all my subtle sensing capacities. It feels like it's here in so many ways. And yet, when you walk down the street, if you're just being with your concrete 3D experience, you would go, I don't know what you're talking about. What are you talking? What do you mean? I see a grocery store, I see a house, I see a light post. Like what world are you talking about? And so it can look a little bit crazy because you're like, no, it's here. It just hasn't quite showed up yet.
Manifested. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it would be like if yeah, it would be like if you only could see a baby once you were holding the baby in your hands, but you couldn't imagine there was a baby inside of a belly for the 9 months it was building. And that's what I mean. The moment's pregnant. It's like to me, I'm walking around, I'm going, humanity is like right at the cusp of like giving birth to an entire new paradigm and collective operating system. And there's sometimes when I feel like, to be honest, it's already happening and now it's at the point of being adopted. So you talked about the 10%. And if anybody looks at the curve, the bell curve of how technologies are adopted, you can just Google this, like the adoption of technologies. It's like you have your early adopters, which is the first 1.5% of people. These are like the crazy people like Forrest who are playing with things, and you never know if they're going to catch, right? And then there's the next one, which is there's the innovators, which is the 1.5%. And then there's the early adopters. And once you get that early adopters group, it's like there starts to become collective. The collective takes this on. And so we're just in the phase right now with this consciousness shift of there's a lot of the innovators and the luminaries and the people playing at the front edge. And then there's a good chunk of people who are now really the early adopters. And we're getting closer and closer to the point where collective consciousness is going to look over and go, hey, there's a different way we could be doing things. And that looks a lot better than what we got going on. And so we can just leave what we've been doing and step over into this new consciousness, into this new paradigm and this new way of doing and creating.
Well, it's interesting because there is a lot of talk, right, about that new paradigm and that new paradigm starting. I think it was the age of Aquarius that started. Was it this year or last year? I can't remember. And now they're talking about the new paradigm, and it's all this like, big shifts. And I've read a little bit about it. I don't know a whole lot about it, but, they're saying that it's really from 1781 to 2027 was a time of deep healing. And that would be including all of the stages that you've just talked about, right? So we're talking, I don't know, maybe we're talking an even bigger shift, who knows? But they're really talking about this great mutation happening in 2027, where things shift, where planets shift, where things are just going to be kind of completely different in a way that it's exactly what you're saying. I like that expression. We're pregnant with that moment. At the moment, it has been coming for, years and years and years, probably the last, I would say probably 20 years. I don't know. Don't quote me on that. But it's like 2027 is when we're actually going to see the results of that, and when everybody will actually be able to see what this new way of being actually means. And, coming from that, apparently it was this time of deep healing, and now we are going more into an individualistic time, but individualistic not in the sense of egoistic, but more in a you can make your own world and you can create your own life, and you can create it the way that you want to create it. You are not necessarily restricted by the ways that we are doing it now in our environment with like governments and schools and all of those sorts of things. It's just going to be more of a free way of creating things. And I didn't come up with this, I'm just like rephrasing that as good as I can. But that is a really interesting aspect, and they talk about it. There's obviously lots of bad things happening along the way, and that's what you were talking about it at the beginning as well. That whole waking up is a combination of passion as well as suffering. So you're seeing like systems crumble, and you're seeing things actually looking like they're getting destroyed, but it's almost this like new emergence of what this next iteration of consciousness is going to be.
Yeah, I mean, when you look around and see the old systems and institutions and ways of being falling apart, I invite everybody to just take some breaths and celebrate that. It's like, hey, we've outgrown a way of doing things that worked for us to get to here and isn't working anymore. So let's acknowledge them and, feel some gratitude and appreciation for what's been here that's got us to this moment. We can grieve that, and also we can make ourselves available for what wants to come online next.
So what is that new world that you're envisaging? Like what's possible for human beings as well as humanity when we're looking at that future,
Yeah, well, I'll start with one of the things I'd really love for everybody to hear. And in a way, it's one of the most radical ideas, and in a way, it's not a radical idea. Uh, and then maybe I can get into some of the more radical ones. Yeah, I had this awareness years ago of like when we shift from looking at what's wrong with the world and the problems that we need to solve to what we actually want to create. Right. I looked at the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and it was like, hey, we've got the first couple of ones are no hunger and no poverty. Right. So you could imagine, like, we want no hunger, we want no war, we want no poverty, we want no slavery. It's all a double negative, right? It's something we don't want, and we're saying we don't want what we don't want. So I'm like, what's the positive? Let me put it this way. What's the possibility creative oriented outcome that we actually want to have happen? And so instead of no poverty and no hunger, we just said, hey, basic survival needs are met for every human being as a starter. I mean, we can do way better than that. But as a starter, basic survival needs are met for every human being. And this was pretty mind-blowing, right? Because if anybody listening to this takes a moment and really sinks into this, you go, wait a second. Right here, right now, in this moment. I always get goosebumps when I say this. Right here, right now, in this moment, right now, we can meet basic survival needs for every human being on planet Earth. Right now. Mm-hmm. We're not lacking technology. We're not lacking resources. We're not lacking infrastructure. No, nothing.
What are we lacking? Humanity.
It's just that systems do what they're built to do, right? And the systems that we have built on planet Earth right now are producing what we've built them to produce. Mm. But if we create the systems and point them towards different ends, meaning we said, hey, how do we create our planetary system so basic survival needs are met for every human being? We can do that right now, right this second. And so that's a consciousness shift, right?
That's one that's very much needed.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's crazy, right? Because the more we sink into that, it's like, okay, basic survival needs are met for every human being on planet Earth. This is available to us right this second. What else is available to us right this second? Right? And the thing that we realize is most people, right? I mean, I don't have data to back this up. I don't, but my intuition says like at least 95% of people are walking around in the world in this survival-based consciousness. Meaning like most of what people do is I need to make enough money or do what needs to be done to feed my family. Like I need to take care of these basic needs so that we can continue to survive. And all of a sudden, you're looking, if anyone knows Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you're looking at that base level of the pyramid being taken care of for everybody. And now it's like, well, there's higher order levels of needs that we can start to address, right? Like, what if we lived in a world where every single person felt access to love and connection and felt deeply seen and listened to and cared for? Well, is that not available to us right this moment?
It is, and what comes up for me like, I mean, I love how you talk about it, and I do agree with the fact that it's all available, but how do you come to terms with the fact that it's possible and we know it could be done right now, but it's not being done because of the systems and because of the way that the world functions at the moment? Because for me right now, that brings up hope on one side and love on one side because of the knowing that we can do it. But at the same time, it brings up really deep sadness because I'm
Oh,
like looking at the
absolutely.
world right now and the state that we're in and the wars that are going on and the people that are suffering for literally, I don't want to say no reason, that's the wrong way to express it, but people that are suffering that are not supposed to suffer. Like, why are we putting people through this? They're experiencing pain that no human is supposed to experience. Like, I just can really feel my heart and my stomach cramping at the same time because it just brings up so much sadness. So how do you navigate your way through that, knowing that it is possible, yes, and it needs a huge consciousness shift, but there is still so much going against it, and that, yeah, I think sadness is the right word for me at this point when I'm thinking about that, because, yeah, I don't think, a child should die because of some government conflicts, like that is to me just insanity, but what do you do, there's so much happening like that in the world, and I don't want to put a negative spin on that. Like, I just want to say, how do you navigate that, and how do you stay positive around those things? And like I said, it just brings up a lot of sadness for me personally, knowing what we could be doing and knowing and seeing what the world is actually doing.
Yeah, and I feel really connected to you right now, and I feel really grateful that you're bringing this because this is some of the most important work that we do in this process. It's like when we open up to possibility, right? We have an expansion in our consciousness. Anybody who's listening to this and who's made it this far has likely had some kind of opening today, being here with us. And when that opening happens, it's like we notice other things that are going on in our experience that we might not have been present to before we opened. And so I'm deeply grateful that you're bringing this because this is part of being with what is. This is part of being with reality. I mean, it is, for me, tremendously sad, everything you shared. And otherwise, if we don't feel this and we're not in contact with this and we're not in relationship with it, then we're like trying to change the world from a really disembodied place, right? And we're like trying to fix the world because we can't be with the depths of despair and grief and sadness and sorrow that we feel about what's going on. And so again, a question would be where are we being in relationship with these knots in our stomach and stuff from, right? So we can go, okay, can I access this deeper ground? Like, how do I feel towards it? It's a common parts work question. But when we access our deeper ground, when we access our soul, when we're coming from wholeness, the place in us that naturally, organically, innately feels curious and loving and compassionate is organically healing. When we're in relationship with these deep sadnesses in us, then we can support a relationship happening from this deeper place. And it's tremendously important. It informs the unfolding of all of this because I ask myself these questions like, how is humanity? Like, we're right at the time where 8 billion people are going to collectively go, hey, we have been so focused on getting somewhere so fast. We don't even know where we're going, but we're trying to get wherever that is faster and faster every day. We don't know where we're going. And we're about to become aware we're doing that and go, why is that? And we're going to turn around and look at hundreds of thousands of years of human history. And there's going to be a lot to look at. There's going to be a tremendous amount of love and beauty and awe and wonder at what we've traversed together and what we've created and all the different ways that we've survived and been able to thrive and grow together. And we also have many, many years of slavery and genocide and blowing each other up and killing each other and terrible, terrible, terrible things that we've done together. And so, as humanity, as a superorganism, if you look at every human being as a cell in the body of a superorganism, it's like I often say, like, humanity is about to go to therapy, right? It's like as a being, we're about to sit down and start to do some self-reflection as a species and go, where have we been? What have we been up to? What's been going well? Right? We're gonna do a retrospective. What's been going well? What could be going better? And where do we want to go from here? And a big part of that is going to be all of us getting in contact with the history that lives in our bones, that lives in our tissues. I mean, we are made up of matter that's been around for billions of years. Like we're made up of, I'm like checking myself now. Let me put it this way. Our ancestors live in our epigenetics. Our ancestors live in our DNA and in our bones and in our blood, right? Our cultural history lives in our blood.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we're walking around as living history, as living history. Everything that's happened in our history is living in us in this moment.
Yeah, and I think that's something that affects me a lot at the moment. Like that how I can feel the collective trauma. You know what I mean? It's like you hear so many people going like, oh, lucky it's not happening here, or lucky like, you know, we are safe and stuff. And in my head I'm going like, but can't you feel the pain? Like, can't you feel what's going on? And that's, I mean, it brings me to tears because it doesn't just happen to a couple of people over there, you know? It happens to all of us. It happens to each and every single one of us. And some people might not be able to feel into it, or they might not want to feel into it, I should say, you know, because the pain is just too overpowering. But I certainly have days where it feels really heavy, you know. And you're talking about humanity going to therapy. I really like that, you know. I really like that expression because it's that awareness of, you know, we are all one and this is happening to all of us, and we need to actually work through that as a human race, you know. It doesn't just affect a few people. And I think that would be such a huge, important lesson to learn, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that's, there's nothing that's not connected, right? It's one thing experiencing
Exactly.
itself through the many.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it just brings to me the need for connection in all this. I mean, the way that, even on the most basic level in co-regulating our nervous systems, right? It's like I facilitate workshops around the world. And one of the most, like, I have this quote that went kind of viral a few years ago. I was on a podcast and I said, most bodies are like a browser with too many tabs open. You know how you open up your computer and you have too many tabs and you get that color wheel that's spinning? That's most, like, I'm a body worker. I facilitate trauma work and healing work with people's bodies. And most bodies that I meet, it's like when I touch them, it's just like there's more information. There's just this backlog of information. There's this color wheel that's spinning. And so you can't open a new tab, you can't close a tab, you can't navigate away from your browser, you can't do anything because there's too much information in the body. And so what we do is we hook up other bodies to that body, right? If you have another person who sits down and gives you some physical touch and really deeply listens to you and really attunes to you, like really attunes to you, listens to you so deeply that you can feel in every cell of your body that you're being heard, that information starts to move through two computers now, right? If one person comes and they're resourced and they have space, they can say, hey, now we have more than one nervous system here. 1 + 1 is way more than 2 in this scenario.
Yeah.
But it's like hooking up another computer into your computer and going, okay, I can be here with you while this information moves. And so I'll go around the world and I'll facilitate gatherings. And sometimes it's like I can't even share any of this stuff with people, right? It's like, hey, we have this big vision for humanity and here's all the things we want to do. No, no. It's like if I start going in that direction, it's not even going to make its way in. And so I'll just put 60 people in a room side by side, back to back, and create this big strip of nervous system co-regulation where everybody's lying there. And I'm like, okay, everybody, just notice you're not alone right now. We can move the information in our body through a network of 60 different nervous systems and hearts and bodies. And you just see people like their whole system will just give. They'll just start breathing. And all of a sudden, whatever has been too much and too big to feel by yourself, it's like now I got this big resource thing, and people will just open and have a huge release or a huge coming online of something that has been deep down wanting to and ready to move.
Yeah, yeah.
And this is some of the most basic stuff in the world. It's just sitting down next to each other and breathing and dropping into deeper states of relaxation and breathing through the process of, I mean, I say it's basic, it's also really advanced from some perspectives, but just breathing through the sensations and the intensities that come up so that we have more bandwidth and more capacity, more space to be with our experience and what's happening in the moment.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. So, Forrest, how important do you think the deep personal and collective healing is in the world that we are living in today? Based on everything that we've talked about today, how important is that?
How important. There's like a cheeky smile happening over here. Like something wants to be like, it's the most important thing that we could be doing right now, which feels really true. And at the same time, there's also a broader awareness of other things that feel really important. Something in me wants to say, like, something in me wants to ground this in something really practical, which is like we're talking about planetary transformation and the next iteration of humanity and inflection points in consciousness and collective trauma and a lot of things that I feel like can be a lot to take on. But I just want to ground this for anybody listening. When my father got diagnosed with cancer and I started looking for answers, I think I was 20 years old, and I found this quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson. And the quote reads, "Who you are speaks so loudly that I can't hear a word you say."
I love that.
And I just want to invite everybody into the awareness of how much it matters the way that we walk through the world, the way that we conduct ourselves. And I mean, this brings tears to my eyes. Every time we pause and we take a moment to breathe and feel our hearts as we relate with our children and our loved ones and the person serving us coffee at a cafe and the customers in our business and the person who cuts us off in traffic. Every time that we just take a breath and feel into our heart and let our heart inform our mind, let our heart resource our brain with the kind of thoughts that we have, I cannot tell you the gift that that is to the world. And so while we're talking about all these ideas, I just want to ground this in something practical, which is at the end of the day, there's a very basic question of like, we can do all these consciousness things and awakening and talk about all this big stuff, but like, what kind of human being are you? Right? Like, how do we walk through the world? How do we conduct ourselves in relationship with other people, with other beings, with nature, and just with our daily lived experience? And I just want to ground that because anybody listening here, like you already are a beautiful light in the world. And the more we become aware of that and just, like I said, bring some awareness into the heart and live more from the heart, it has more implications and more consequences in reality than we would fathom.
Forrest, thank you so much. It was an absolute pleasure talking to you today and hearing your, wisdom and your knowledge. I could keep talking to you for days. I hope this wasn't our last conversation. I hope that there will be many more to come because, I think you've just really got such a wealth of, I don't even know what I call it. It's like, it's a wealth of deep knowing of the world and how it works and how we work in it and how we can create change in it. And I can't thank you enough for sharing that message. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's good to be with you.
Thank you.
And thanks to all the listeners here with us and holding you in a big field of love.
Thank you. So first, we're going to tell our listeners in a minute where they can find you, how they can get in touch with you, But before we do that, The 3 pearls of wisdom that I'm taking away from today's podcast, besides everything that Forrest has said today, I think I have to re-listen to the podcast to really embody all of the information. But the 3 pearls of wisdom that came out for me was when we're talking about the levels of consciousness, and we had this moment in the podcast where Forrest was consciously shifting consciousness states, which I found really interesting. And he was talking about, you can think about where you're speaking from, and how your language is coming across and how your body language is coming across. And there was just this real shift in his voice and in the way that he was sitting in his chair, of just this deepening into a really calm and collective state of being. And you could just really see that something has shifted. So reminding ourselves that, listening to ourselves, listening to the way we speak and how we can make a change even in the moment. You don't necessarily need to go and sit in meditation in order to do that, but you can also practice to really change consciousness states in the moment. The second pearl of wisdom was Forrest talking about the ground of well-being, and he was referring to it as the deepest depth of our soul, which is really where all the truth and all the knowledge of who we are as people is. And if we can access that more frequently and more consciously, we can also bring out more beautiful things into the world. And the last thing that I really liked that Forrest said as well was, shifting the way we look at things from seeing problems to looking at what we can actually create to make a difference. What is the possibility out there and how can we actually contribute creatively in order to really make a difference and create an impact in the world? Because so often we get hung up on the negative, but what if we would, swap that and look at the positives and how we can actually create a more positive and more beautiful future. So Forrest, these are some of the pearls of wisdom that I have written down today while we were talking. Like I said, there was so much in this episode. Tell us, where can people find you? If our listeners liked what they've heard today, where can they find you? How can they get in touch with you? What's on offer for them?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you go to ouremergingfuture.com, we have a free WhatsApp community that you can join. So you can find me in our WhatsApp community and be a part of the community. If what we're talking about here is resonating with you and you want to be a part of a growing collective of people who are living in these questions and exploring this way of being together, then we welcome you to join. And you'll also find different offerings and different journeys that you can go on through the Our Emerging Future website. I know you're in Australia, so I'd love for your listeners to know that we're going to be in Australia in September and October of this year, 2024. So we're doing a gathering just outside of Sydney, which if you go to ouremergingfuture.au, you can find the information there. It'll also be linked on the Our Emerging Future website. We'll be running a 2-month incubator in Australia and doing a gathering and also training practitioners. So there's a bunch of different ways to get engaged with us in Australia in September and October. And then you can find me on Forrest with 2 R's, Forrest, B as in boy, Wilson, Wilson @gmail.com, and forrestbwilson.com and Forrest B. Wilson on Instagram. And I'm Forrest B. Wilson pretty much everywhere. So if you search that on YouTube or anywhere else, Facebook, you'll find me. So happy to be in touch with you in whatever way feels good.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that, Forrest. Do get in touch with Forrest if you want to find out more, if you want to see what Our Emerging Future is working on, and if you, more importantly, want to be part of a community that's really working on beautiful, deep and conscious topics and wants to support other people doing the same thing. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. I really hope you got something out of this episode today. Please do share the podcast with your family, with your friends, or anyone you think might benefit from this information. I really hope this episode brought some sunshine to your soul. I'm sending love and light your way, and until